Hey everyone, it's Glenn from Backblends Fish. Today's video is the 2021 full fish room tour of my breeding facility in Lena Valley, Hobart, Tasmania. For those of you who don't know me, I am very focused on breeding African Rift Lake Cichlids. It's my passion. I love the Tanganyika group in particular. I'm keeping around 70-80 species currently, and we're going to try and get a look-see into all the tanks on this tour. Settle down, go get yourself a beer, a coffee, a packet of chips. This is probably going to be a good 40-minute video at least, and I'm hoping that you will enjoy. See you soon. Just before we get started today, I want to offer up a bit of a disclaimer, a waiver if you like, regarding the video you're about to watch. I'd love this to be the best fish room tour you've ever seen in your life. I think I've got an interesting fish room and a good story to tell. Unfortunately, I'm not a hobbyist. I'm doing this for business as well. I'm trying to make a dollar out of breeding and selling these fish, and I am loaded to the hilt with work. There's 111 odd fish tanks in this build by the time it's completed. You can't do that level of water change by yourself in a weekend and get it all schmick and ready for filming. So you're going to see some tanks that aren't pristine clear water. You're going to see some scale on glass. These tanks are not display tanks in your lounge room. These are breeding tanks in a working fish room. So make of that what you will. You're going to see some rough around the edges stuff. However, I believe the fish are interesting, and I hope I can tell a good story on that. The other thing I'm going to offer up at the outset, not as a sympathy grab or a whatever, I am legally blind. I have a rare form of macular degradation, which means that filming is a challenge for me. I don't necessarily see what's on that little tiny screen at the time of filming, and I don't know whether I'm getting all the footage I want to get to capture these fish in the best light. I'm doing my best with doing a film and then a bit of narration over the top later on. So if you see some stuff where it looks like I've patched in a bit of B-roll footage, that's exactly what's happened, where a fish is not turned up in the original and I've got it later on. That's why things might seem a little disjointed. Sometimes you're wondering why things aren't as beautifully focused, or why the hell is he looking at that rock? That happens, I'm afraid. You're going to have to bear with me. I'm very keen to make YouTube a component of my business, and unfortunately I built a fish room long before I knew about YouTube, and trying to work in a room that's got aisles that are 65 centimetres wide, hard work. It is what it is. Anyway, enough of me babbling. Let's get on with the video proper. I really do hope you enjoy. So here we have some drone footage taken late in 2020. A flyover of the shed, which is located at the back of my house. It's a Bondor cool room construction. The panels are 90mm thick polystyrene sandwiched between colour bond. Fantastic insulation properties, and that's stood me in good stead in terms of power usage moving forward. The overall dimensions of the shed are 8 metres long by 3 metres wide, 2.2 metres high at the back edge and 2.4 metres high at the front edge. Now let's check out what's under the hood. So when the new design is fully completed with those extra couple of tanks, I'm going to end up with 111 tanks in this room, which has a capacity of around 14,000 litres. The room is heated with a 3.2 kilowatt air conditioner, a Fujitsu I think it is, reverse cycle, so that allows me to be hot in warm in winter and cool in summer.
Not that we get too much trouble with that in Tassie, but it's still nice to be able to hold your fish at temp. The shed itself is individually wired to its own meter, so I know exactly what power I'm using, which is a great thing to do to help out with your costings. Apart from the heating, I'm getting some free heat from the filtration system, which is all powered by a 370 watt air blower. The entire room runs off that one centralised system, which you can see in one of my other videos. The only other filter I run in this room is a single canister filter that adds to the Frontosa tank, just to give that a little bit of extra grunt. Lighting is the LED style T5 integrated system that I've also done a video on. I'm all but completed the complete fit out of my room with that lighting, so that it's going to be a lot nicer in future videos, and it's helping me to see what's going on. My incoming water, I have hot and cold water to the shed, and we're lucky enough to be on gas in my area, so with the little instant gas hot water I can basically run as much water as I want and can afford, as long as there's no one in the shower inside. And I have the option of putting that water through a carbon and sediment filter, which gives extra benefit at water change time. I'm not using much in the way of chemicals to strip the chlorine out, and I'm not having to hold all that water, which is of great benefit because I'm limited for space. I think that's pretty much the tail of the tape for my shed. I'll flip over now. We'll have a quick run around the room, and then we'll start looking at the fish.
So we're going to do a quick lap of the fish room. This is what you would see if you were physically here, coming in the door. On my left, this first rack is inspirationally named in my system Rack A, being the first rack. I have a letter for each particular rack, and I number my tanks within that rack and label up those little stickers to include the volume in each tank, just in case I need someone to be feeding my fish while I'm away and they do a water change or whatnot. Anyway, Rack A. We have a couple of large tanks on top, which are for specific breeding projects that require a decent volume of water. We're going to go through all these tanks in further detail, so don't panic on the lack of info here. Underneath we have 15 85 litre grow out tanks, and in this particular corner is where I house my various peacock cichlids. Obviously very important not to mix up the peacocks, so each variant has its own tank for grow out. As we step a bit further into the room, we hit Rack B. This is the longest rack in my room. That's 7.2 metres down to the far end. This is recently being upgraded after some major failings in the previous design, and where a timber rack basically was collapsing under the weight of the tank and due to water causing rot in racks. We have a large 8-foot tank up the top here with my Frontosa group in them. The gap you see down there, I am having new tanks built to go in there. A couple of 6-foot tanks and a 4x18 to give me a few more larger tanks. The main function of this wall is for breeding, and underneath we have 2 rows of 6, giving me a total of 12, basically 4-foot tanks. These are 200 litres in volume. They're not quite standard 4-foot. They were calculated and designed to be the 200 litre volume. Plenty big enough for various Malawi and Victorian cichlid projects. and obviously the 8-foot tank taking precedence for Frontosas, which is a big bread and butter colony for me to have running to try and help fund this. This is rack C. We have a total of 14 tanks in this rack, consisting of 4 by 18 by 18 on top, 4 of, and a couple more to begin the row on the left hand end, and then the remaining 8 tanks underneath are 3 by 18 by 18. This is where I focus heavily on my Tanganyikans, which is, as I mentioned in the intro, my passion. I love the different challenges that Tanganyikan cichlids provide, and it's just not all about getting a male and 17 females like it is with all the Victorians and Malawis. The Tangs give you some pair bonding behaviour, which is, I guess, what the American cichlid people probably enjoy. You've got shell dwellers, you've got mid-water spawners, you've got feather fins. There's a lot of variety in the Tangs, and that's what I enjoy. So rack C, Tanganyikans, and some peacock cichlids, primarily so that I'm not risking hybridisation, which can happen if you run them with other Malawis. Around the corner, this is rack D. This is all for grow out of the fish that I've either bought into on sale or have bred. Across the top, 6 200 odd litre tanks. They're 0.8 by 0.45 tall by 0.6. Sorry, I flopped from imperial to metric. I do default to feet sometimes because I'm old enough to remember when that was a thing. Underneath we have 3 rows of 10, giving us 30 85 litre grow outs. These are the same as we saw in rack A. Once again, I'm trying to just not mix too many species in these tanks for ease of identification and keeping track. And finally, in the quick lap, row E or rack E, we have 28 50 litre tanks. These are 90 centimetres long, so 3 foot in the old, 30 tall, 20 deep, 50 litres, which are handy enough for, in this case, we've got some Ockies breeding. We've got pairs of Julies, we've got some Fry just growing out, and I've also got that third row from the top divided chambers, which allow me to run some aggressive male cichlids that maybe are surplus to my breeding needs and need time out, or just need to be partitioned so that I can hold them in good condition for potentially resell. So that's the approximate layout of my shed in a quick grab. 114 tanks in total. Let's get on to some more detailed tour.
So the first 2 tanks on the top row of rack A are 1.2 metres by 0.6 by 45 centimetres tall. They give a volume of around 300 litres, and these 2 tanks are incredibly important for doing significant breeding projects. I find that certain fish do better up on the top shelf. They settle in and just do very well. What we're looking at here is the project on hand, the Lamprologus Simulus. This is a form of Malawi Barracuda. It's a dwarf form. It's not as big as the Macrothalmus. I have 4 of these and I'm desperately keen to get them going. These guys are sitting over the top of a net full of detritus that I hooked out of the fish pond in the front yard with a view to adding some condition, and these guys enjoyed it. They're still looking. The little dithers on the bottom are some Pseudotropheus elongatus mapanga, which are just there for dither and to get chased around if need be when that boy fires up. Tank number 2, we're looking at some Chilotilapia eucalyptus in the foreground with some Burundi Frontosas to dither this tank. I've got around 5 juvenile eucalyptus here, and I've had an incredibly tough time getting these to breed, mainly because I had a couple of quite large females that assumed dominance, and I think it was suppressing the coloration of a young male. It's already looking better for having taken those 2 big girls out yesterday. I think there's a little lad here starting to find himself and show a bit of dominance, so hopefully these little guys are going to kick on and we'll get a nice showstopper male to form the basis of my colony. Later on I hope to bring the other 2 girls back and end up with a decent colony of these. The remaining tanks in rack A are the smaller grow out tanks. They're 0.45 across the front, 0.6 deep into the shelf and 35 centimetres tall, topping out at about 85 litres per. This is where I'm growing out all my various peacock varieties, and what we're looking at here is Alonacara Stuart Grant-Eye Cobway. There's my first production on these. Hoping to get these up to size and saleable fairly soon. We have the special guest entry of my good boy Elwood licking a bit of fish food up for me. Tank number 2 in this row is a batch of last year's production of Malana bicolour peacock. We have a pretty nice little boy in there, and I'll essentially pick myself a new colony from these 20 or so fish and give them a run in a tank soon to hopefully produce myself another batch of fry for next season's sales. Quite a nice fish. Third tank across is my production of Nagara flametails, or Alonacara Stuart Grant-Eye Nagara. They don't look too much at this size. These are a bit smaller, at about between 25mm up to about 50mm. There is a really nice little boy in here that's coloured up, but he's pretty shy. You may see him flash through at some point, but you might not. It might look a bit average. I'm focusing fairly heavily on having a decent collection of the various bloodlines of peacock that are available in Australia at the minute, and doing my best to keep them clean and straight and to type. Is this little lad over here? Maybe. Well, there he went. So that's my Nagara flametails. Next we have some Alonacara candensis, the blue orchid peacock. These fish have come over recently from Melbourne from a couple of new contacts that I've made in the industry. Hello, Am and Matt, if you're watching. The 2 larger fish are females that generationally are a step ahead of the smaller ones. I bought the trio some time ago, and unfortunately the male never really settled too well, and he ended up dying about 2 months after I got him. Luckily I've got some more juvies there to work with, and soon we'll get a little boy. We'll step up. 5th tank across in the second row. These are like the Malanas. This is last year's production of Benga peacocks, the last sort of 20 or so that I have, ranging 4 centimetres up to 6 and 7. Once again, we've got quite a nice little boy in here, and I think I will endeavour to pick out a colony of these pretty soon, and we'll give them a run and hopefully produce some more. Alonacara benchi. So here we're looking at a couple of mouthfuls of Alonacara Jacob Freebergi, the Cape Maclear variant, the tumbler there, obviously very new, and these little fry, literally only 3 or 4 days old. Very, very pleased to have some of these coming through. This is probably one of my favourite peacocks, and the dad's quite the showstopper, so I'm looking forward to growing these out and being able to sell a few in the not too distant future. This tank is the commonly called red shoulder peacock, which is Alonacara Stuart Grant Eye Chilo Elo. There's 5 fish in here. I would have loved a chance to breed some of these. The male in under the shelf there is actually a absolute jet, but he's also, despite hiding like a coward now, he's actually a really nasty fish a lot of the time, and he's making it very difficult for the rest of his tank mates. So I think I need to secure some more of these to make a bigger colony and put some time and effort into getting the balance right down the track, and that's very achievable, but at the minute just not happening. Third tank across, these are the Sunshine Peacock, Alonacara Stuart Grant Eye Maliri Islands. Once again from a pretty nice line of fish. The dad's very good looking boy, and there's 50 or so little bubbies in here that we just need to pump food and water change into to get them grown out and up to saleable size as soon as possible. This group of fish is the Cape Maclear, the Jacob Freebergi that the fry in the first tank came from. These are the fish that came from Am a little while back. Hey Am, have decided that this is the way I want to go. The male is a beautiful boy. He's got a damaged eye, which is a result of injury, so no threat to breeding, and just a really good example of the type when you get on the net and look at pictures. We're not getting a good look at him here, unfortunately. He's always been a bit of a shy male, and this is a tank that's down low. He would do better up on a top shelf, but we'll get to that, and he's breeding in that tank anyway, so no big problem. Last tank on the row is currently empty, and this is where we'll pop some red Ribbon Peacocks when we breed them. This bottom row will be a fairly quick cut through just because it's not that interesting in terms of colour and dynamics. That first tank was an empty of fish. The second tank here we have some Eureka Red Peacocks. They're last year's juvies once again. They're fairly towy because they're on the bottom row, and I've not long had my hand in there. 20 or 30 fish up the back, I guess. Not that invested in these, given that they're a fairly common fish to be able to buy in at any stage. This tank is my first breeding of some really nice bloodline sulphur crested peacocks, Alonacara maylandi. Not that many fry in here, unfortunately. I did a water change and a couple dropped off, but maybe 12 fish that are at the 15 mil mark, and they're pre-sold and heading up to Queensland when they're ready. Tank number 4 on the bottom row has a couple of mouthfuls of Alonacara Coningsi mabenji, which is the blue Regal peacock. The adults of these are really lovely, and pretty glad that they've done some production for me. We're looking forward to growing these out quickly and maybe chucking a few back in the colony and hopefully putting some onto the market as a nice new offering. And last on the bottom row here is a spawn from a couple of months back of the Alonacara Lawanda, the red top peacock. Fairly good seller for me in the past, so pleased to have a batch of these on the back burner to come through sometime soon for sale. So Rack B, this is all about breeding colonies and projects. We have on the top row here, this tank's 2.3 meters long by 450 high and deep. That tops out at about 420 litres, I believe, and is the prime home for my colony of Burundi Frontosas, 6 Bar Frontosas in the common speak. My big lad has done a number on that filter there. I've got to replumb that. This group of fish are a beautiful line of fish that came into the country some years back to be bred for one of the big wholesalers, and I was lucky enough to eventually get onto a collection of these. I think this boy here we're looking at would be around the F2 generation by now, and they just produce the most magnificent clean little fry with beautiful colours. Even though it's Burundi, it's not the most sought after variant. There's plenty of colour involved in these as juveniles, and I'm loaded up pretty heavily here. There's 30 odd fish in this tank. Down the rest of this shelf, I am now getting some bigger tanks built with a view to maybe running a few colonies of these, just to pump out some proper numbers, because they're a fish that you can never have too many of. They'll be easy enough to palm off to wholesalers if need be. In the front there's one of the big Eucalyptus females that I spoke of earlier that was bullying those juveniles, and you can see relative to the big boy at the back, who's a 30 centimetre fish, they're quite large Eucalyptus. We have a couple of demicomps in there which are kind of just growing on a bit to get their chance in another tank, and there was a couple of stray marble peacock females which I may or may not get around to finding a male. I'm not a huge fan of hybrid style peacocks, but on the other hand, they potentially pay some bills if your average LFS is taking an order. They probably want a few of those. The two bottom rows on tank Rack B are all the same size. These tanks are 1150 by 400 tall by 450 wide, and that comes in at a bit over the 200 litre mark. I'm using these primarily for Malawi breeding, but also the occasional Victorian. What we have in this tank is a group of cobalt blue cichlids, fairly obviously the blue ones. We also have a quad of Chilotilapia rhodesii, which are the largest fish in the tank that are breezing past every so often. The third species running in this tank is the hippo point salmon. This is a Lake Victorian cichlid. Next along the ranks is a group of Haplochromis species 35 tomatoes, which is another Victorian cichlid. The females don't look amazing, but the boy certainly does when he's on his game. Top right of the corner there, you'll see my male Otopharynx tetraspilus, the yellowfin mulatto. I have a trio of those in here. The boy's quite a big fish now. He's nearly 15. Well, he's certainly 15. He's more like 18 centimetres. He always hangs at the back unless the food's about. Bit of a timid lad, but nice fish nonetheless. And this sensational young fella is a male Metria climber species Kawanga Gold. I did have a good number of these for a while, and I ran into a bit of strife. We're down to literally a pair of that boy there and the less attractive little girl. There she is in front of the filter. But hopefully I do have another little batch of these coming down from a good buddy up in Sydney to bolster the colony back out. Next tank along, a colony of Astatotilapia lafasciata. In Australia these get called crimson tides, and it's wrong. They're a Lake Kyoga species, I believe. They get passed off as being Lake Victorians, but they're not. The yellowfish are Metria climber species Membi Deep, and the third fish in this tank are Otopharynx tetrastigma. The Membi Deep are the important fish in this tank from the rarity point of view in Australia. I don't know too many people that are breeding these, and pretty keen to have a little batch here to play with. Next along the way, we have a group of Placidochromis Electra, the deep water Electra, deep water hap. I've got 5 decent fish, the lovely boy up the back there, and some juveniles just to bolster the colony out. The yellowfish is a female Trophiops chalumba. I have 2 adult females in here, plus that dark male there in the background. Very, very striking fish, and we've got some juveniles buzzing around as well. We're bolstering this colony back out, bearing in mind all these fish have just recently come out of all manner of confinement and cramping when I had to rebuild this entire back rack over the last 2 or 3 months. This pairing seems to have worked well for me in the past, so I've just gone with it again. Next up, as I creep into position, this it's one of the few tanks that I've put back together with any rock work as yet. I've gone a bit bare bottom in some of them, and consequently the fish are pretty happy to hide. This is a group of electric yellows, and they're certainly here to be a bread and butter component to my breeding facility. I don't think you can have too many of those if the quality is right. The hap species in here is the Placidochromis species J-Lo Reef, and they're something I'm pretty excited about having a young group of to play with. They're not always about in Australia, so I don't think I'll have any trouble moving some of these if I'm lucky enough to breed. These fish are still only bubbies. They're maybe 5 centimetres for the largest, and we're just waiting for them to grow on and puff up and get into it. And last on the second row in this tank, we have another Victorian. that is a broken Bar Cichlid, the biggest fish in the front there with the long black stripe. That's female. I've got 4 of these. I think I don't have a male, and I'm going to be able to get one from Labyrinth Aquarium in a upcoming buy. The goldy coloured fish is a Placidochromis species Mabamba Bay. These are another fairly uncommon Placidochromis variant in Australia. We have a little boy here somewhere. There he is. They get the blue face quite like a Benga peacock, and are quite a pretty little fish. The Mabuna in this tank don't look much yet because they're very young. That's a group of Cynotilapia zebroides cobway, commonly Afracobway in Australia. And this is a really nice bloodline. I ran into a bit of strife with my colony and it kind of collapsed, but luckily I had juveniles growing up and put away, and the 20 or so fish in here are exactly that. We'll build a new colony from them. So now we're back onto the bottom row of Rack B. The first tank here, we have a young group of Pseudotropheus Aci Masulu Point, commonly known as the yellow tail Aci in the trade. Good fish to have because both male and female are colourful, and they're colourful as juveniles, so very easy to sell. You're not going to make a squillion, but you certainly shouldn't have any trouble moving these little guys. I'm yet to decide what hap species I'm going to run in this tank. Just letting these little fish find their fins and settle in. Next along we have a real rodeo of a tank. These Mabuna that we're looking at up top are Pseudotropheus cyaneus, which I believe are very rare in Australia. They were imported a long time ago through the famous St George Aquarium, and I've been lucky enough to produce or access a group and have had some success breeding. I think I might be about the last bloke left in the country that's trying. They're super aggressive. We're running with not much habitat here. There is some floating Aggie pipe in the top for the females to get into if they really need to. And we're running them in conjunction with some reasonably sized Venustus that are quite big and able to deal with it. It's kind of ironic to have the hap sitting on the bottom and the Mabuna on top. This tank contains Elongatus mapanga, a really nice line of mapanga, probably one of the better examples that I've seen. Very keen to produce these. I've got a bigger colony in the house and they'll come out to be added to these. And some good old tough as nails blue dolphins, which once again form a staple in the hobby and are a good fish that most pet shops will be keen to take. Next tank along, we are looking at some young Otopharynx lithobates, the Zimbabwe rock variant, and the Mabuna we're looking at is Labidochromis perlmut, pearl of Tanzania, I think they go as for a common name. Run into trouble with my lithobate colony, so these are juveniles and a couple of females left from that colony, which we will endeavour to get size on and get producing again. And I've got up an option to pick up a few more. Here we have a young group of Manganos. They pretty much go without explanation. Colourful fish, good bread and butter stock. The important one in this tank is the young group of Protomylus stevani Taiwan Higa Reef variant. I'm lucky to have some of these and very keen to get them up and running. And the last tank in Rack B is another couple of, I guess, common fish in the hobby. The red Empress. This is a variant from Namalanji Island. Reasonably clean new fish to the country, so quite a nice boy there, and these are just starting to produce well. And accompanying them we have the humble Rusty, a fish that I'm very in favour of. Some people don't go them, but I think it's an important fish to have in the basic community tank, and lovely colour. Okay, so here we are in Rack C. This is without question my favourite rack of tanks in the whole fish room. This is where I have the most fun. The top row of tanks are 4x18 by 18, so 250, 260 odd litres, which is prime grow out. In this tank we have a colony of Alonacara Malandi, beautiful line of sulphur crested peacocks, one of the more recently imported into the country, which is probably still 3 or 4 years ago with all the COVID stuff. And my pride and joy, a colony of Ophthalmotilapia ventralis mapimwi. This end of the tank is where the male comes to do his business. This is commonly known as a silver streak, by the way. Just a magnificent, boisterous fish, a lot of fun to have, and I'm probably one of the last custodians of this fish in the country at the minute. Everyone's chasing me for them. Tank number 2, top row, major colony of Alonochranus dewinti. You can check out another video I've made on those. We have some Empire Gudgeon loitering in the front right corner there as a bit of a dither and a weird and wonderful Australian native additive to a Tanganyika tank essentially. And I am running a colony of the blue neon peacock in here. We have a fairly nice big boy there. He's one of the bigger peacocks I own, but he's also quite gentle, and I'm not sure whether he's doing his job. I haven't had much luck breeding these as yet, despite having some cherry ripe young females. So he needs to lift his game. Third tank along, we have some young Cyarthopharynx foey, the Cape Cachese variant. These are still a ways off breeding, probably hit the 7 to 8 centimetres, so I'm waiting probably another 6 months, but super excited to have them. And that's my male stud breeder Nagara Flametail. I have a decent colony of those in this tank. This tank doesn't look much at first glance. This is my colony of Furcifer, Cyarthopharynx furciferetia, and here's a boy that's not even anywhere close to trying. They are just the most amazingly spectacular fish when they're on song. He's not even displaying in a pit here. A lot of colours, I guess, that go with being a slightly deeper water fish. They look different depending on what angle you view them at, and I don't think I've ever seen one under natural light. It's always been artificial light. Housed with my Stuart Grady Cobway colony. On the second row we have 4x18 to begin, which the shells you see are scattered about for some Lamprologus ornatopinus that we worked with. We ended up getting a pair and breeding these in a smaller tank. We're also housing in this tank a decent colony of the Alonocara Coningsi mabenji, the blue Regals. And the main focus of this tank was to have a crack at the Callochromis melanostigma. Unfortunately, I only have an old pair left, and I think their best is behind them, and some of the juveniles that I'd kept I managed to lose through lack of a water change at a key moment, which was pretty disappointing. This tank is a 3x18, the rest of this row are all 3x18s, and we're looking at a big colony of Lamprologus brevis, the Icola variant sunspot brevis. The tank looks pretty shoddy in terms of how green it all is, but if you look into the water from above, it's incredibly clear water. All that algae and whatnot is keeping that water fairly pristine. The brevis do enjoy it. They keep their shells clean enough, and I just need to divvy them up and into pairs to do better. This tank has got a lone Descampsi female left in it. I've had a bit of problem with this as well. Much of this stemming from late last year when I had to rebuild my rack and cram all my fish together. And the peacock we're running here is a secondary colony of the Jacob Freeberg Cape Maclear variant. I'm going to mix and match this with the other group that we looked at earlier to work on the lineage. This tank has a trio of what I believe to be the most beautiful Neo-Lamprologus on the planet. This is Basheri Canacondi. They are just a magnificent combination of bold colours, the brown and black and tan combo, but also with some lovely blue trim on the fins. I have bred these once or twice, but I've struggled to produce any good numbers of them. There's a very good pair in here that get along well, but I'm not sure what I'm missing here, whether it's a food thing or a tweak on water parameters, but very invested on persisting with these, just given how beautiful they are. And last tank in the row is my group of Chalanochromis brichardi. Up until pretty recent times, I had these pegged as a good step breeder. I had a lot of fry in this tank at various sizes, so from different spawns, and this tank was pretty green like the brevis tank earlier, to the point where the front glass was terrible and I didn't keep a good eye on it, and suddenly my adults are incredibly big, but I don't have any juvies left, so I've got to knuckle down and have another go at getting these to produce a very cool little fish. This is another interesting Tanganyikan. We're looking at some Pitio Lamprologus Attenuatus, and they're a very interesting body shape and quite a pretty little fish. These are some juveniles that I recently got in, have had this in the past and can't wait to have a go again. Next tank along is some Telmatochromis Vitatus. This is a kind of a weird and wonderful little fish. It's sort of shell dweller, cave spawner type. Looks a bit similar to a Julie, I guess, but there are quite a few fish in this genus and some of the other ones don't. This tank, the Tanganyikan, is the Astartotilapia bertoni, which look for all intentions like a Victorian. You can see a male coming in on the bottom left corner there, and we've got them grouped with a bunch of the dragon blood or the fire red peacocks, which, as I've mentioned earlier, probably not my favourite thing, being the hybrid style of peacock. This is my breeding pair of Julidochromis Mark Smithi. This is a bit of film of the male in another tank because we're not getting a look at them in the 3-footer on the bottom here. They're pretty towy. I can say there's a hell of a lot of fry in here at the minute, where the move has done them well, and there's plenty of bubbies in there when the tucker goes in. And last on this row is my project. I'm trying to get Limnochromis auritus going again. You can see a nose poking out of the pipe there. There's 2 fish that seem to have cozied up in there. I'm hoping to get these breeding again. I did lose one of the breeding pair that I had late last year. So from here on, this is where a lot of my grow out happens, and as a consequence we're meeting a lot of fish here again that we've already seen. I'm not going to bother with labelling unless we hit something that is new. This is a tank with some grow out yellowfin mulatto and Pseudotropheus cyaneus. This tank's a bit of a mess. It's some fish that I'm still housing for the cichlid guy that are going to go up to his new room soon. We've got some deep water Electra, the Fort Maguire variant, and some Metriaclima zebra long pelvic Medocas, a couple of Frontosas, mostly not my fish. This is a tank with some zebra obliquitans that I've bred and a spawn from some time back of the iceberg electric blues. I'm not working with the electric blues anymore, which is why I didn't mention them earlier. Next along we have a very busy tank full of Pseudotropheus mapanga, elongatus mapangas, and some Haplochromis species 35 tomatoes, a stray dragon blood, a stray electric yellow. Another tank that's kind of a mosh. These are my VC10 females. I am currently without a male and I'm trying to track one down. So they're in a kind of a holding pattern with some blueberry zebras and a Smilorincus maybe. There's a couple of odds and ends in here that are still crammed and waiting for home. And here are the last of some angelfish that were brought in when I was still trying to supply the cichlid guy and his website. Some lovely pearl scales and whatnot in here. Quite a mixed bag of angels. Okay, so now we're on the second row. These are now 85 litre grow outs. The top row was 200, which I forgot to mention. That first one is empty. This is a group of sulphur crested lithorbate fry, the Zimbabwe rock variant, at about 3.5 to 4 centimetres. Nice active little group of fish. This is a group of the red Empress Namalanji Island up the front, and down the back we will have a few rusty bopping around in the rocks and pipes. This tank actually has my colony of sunshine peacocks, which are here to sort of time out. They bred pretty heavily and to the point where I didn't need any more, so I've crammed them in here to stop them, and then they are still breeding. We also have a spare Namalanji bopping around in there, I think. It's funny how fish will breed in small tanks sometimes. Here we have a couple more odds and ends. We've got a pair of Joan Johnsonay, I think that is, a male and a female, and another Namalanji, just kind of in timeout mode once again. This is my breeding group of Tailmatochromis Malawi Burundi. This is a really nice line of fish. They're very cleanly marked. Beautiful big pair in the corner there on the left. Then they're needing to go to a bigger tank to thrive. Here we have some of their offspring. These I sort of separated late last year when I had to pull the back rack out and pull the cube tanks off the top row. There's also a couple of little Chalanochromis brachadi in there. These are some Tailmatochromis Malawi gombi fry and a few upside down catfish and maybe a gold ockie fish that I'm a surplus and I'm trying to sell. And these are a bit hard to see, but we've got a breeding pair of Lamprologus ornatopinus in here, and we've had some success with some fry. These don't belong to me, these are cichlid guy fish, but nice to get a result. And I've got no idea what they are. I'd have to check my notes on what's in the tumbler there. And last tank on the second row of rack D, we have a trio of Lamprologus Basheri Canacondi in here as well. We split down the group we had, and nice big boy sitting there in front, and shows some really positive signs with one fish, and the third fish is usually up the back in one of the corners, and it's been very difficult for me to get that fish out. And I think that's a big clutch of Furcifer fry, so quite a few in there. Do desperately want to breed these Bicheri. They're just such a beautiful tang. Onto the third row. This tank has a couple of spawns of the Deepwater Electra and the yellowfish, the Trophiops Chilumba. Got a nice tank full going on there. Second along, some Alonocranus dewinti, the silvery things, not too many in there unfortunately, and a heap of baby Frontosa, which way up the back there. The big colony of Frontosa is just starting to bear some fruit for me. The females are still very young and obviously long breeding careers ahead, so I'm going to breed a lot of Frontosa. This is a poorly framed group of Elongatus mapanga fry. I've got these things sort of everywhere. We had a bit of a run on, and I do need to get around to consolidating them into one tank just for housekeeping's sake. This is a colony of the cichlid guy's fish. These are the Pundamelia Nyurari Rooty Island variant. Nice big boy there. I've got a video on these down in the Victorian section if you want to have a better look. This tank, we have some baby Pitio Lamprologus lamarii bopping around on the floor. I'm not sure what's in the tumbler. I do write it all down, so I do know, but we'll get to, I think it possibly is a mouthful of Venustus. Here we have a young group of Furcifer, Cyarthopharynx Furcifer Risha, and up the back and being toey will be some Astato-tilapia Bertoni fry. This is a group of Alonocranus dewinti. I think maybe a couple of mouthfuls that were stripped some months ago. These fish are rapidly approaching breeding size, so a nice ready-made project for someone to cash in on soon. This is a tank I'm pretty proud of. We have on the bottom some baby Julidochromis Mark Smithi, and the little silverfish bopping around are fry from the silver stream ventralis. I've got people lining up hand over fist for these, so can't wait to get to the point where I can sell some and pay a power bill. Love the little Mark Smithi Julies too, they're super pretty. This is a batch of Lalupi that, if you wanted to trawl through last year's fish room tour, you would have seen these as tiny little babies. These are an orange form of Lalupi, but they haven't produced amazingly quality coloured fry, so I'd only be able to sell them as yellows. And here we have some more of my beautiful little baby Fronnies. Maybe 7 or 8 of those, sort of the last of a batch up looking for tucker. And on to the bottom row we go. This is a bit clunky for filming, so I apologise if it's not too smooth. First tank is a group of the Astato-tilapia fasciata, the zebra obliquitans. Second tank along, a couple of mouthfuls of Haplochromis species 35 tomato. Doesn't look like much going on now. much different story when the food goes in, it comes to life. But did manage to produce a few of these in a recent trip to the tank. Next along are their close relative, the species 44 thick skins. These things are quite an aggressive Victorian, but certainly a pretty fish on its day. There's a little boy there, 4 or 5 centimetres, starting to show some nice colour, so might pick him out to work with as a breeder. Here we have a lot of the Rudi Island, the Nyuries from the colony sitting directly above them. These are cichlid guys production. We have, I think, an empty tank here. Yep. This is a mixture of cobalt blue cichlid fry and some of the hippo point salmon, the Victorians. They're coming along nicely, most of those around 3 centimetres, so getting pretty close to saleable for me. This is another tank of the cichlid guys fish. This is a group of multis. There's a lot of males in this group, unfortunately, which is evident by all those fish sitting up in the mid-water. The dominant ones will have the good spots on the bottom, and the rest have to make do. So a bit of work into that to get the colony back in balance. Here is my last spawn of Lamprologus Simulus fry out looking for their breakfast. They're very darty little fish at this size, and on the bottom row a bit towy. Do like that fish. This is my somewhat out of balance colony of Lamprologus Simulus. These desperately need to get put up to a tank up high where I can show them some love. They got moved late last year as part of the renovation that had to happen, and they haven't done well down here, unfortunately. I'm going to have to source a few more and put some effort back in. And another tank of the cichlid guys fish. The Victorian you see is the Nyurie, but the Python Island variant, so very closely related to the Rudi Island, and only different by location, and some baby multis in there. Righto, we're on the last wall. All the tanks on this wall are 50 litres, so great for little projects. What we have in this tank is a pair of Pinoy Angelfish. I don't know much about what the Pinoy thing means. These aren't mine, they're the cichlid guys, but that pair is absolutely ready to spawn. This is another Pinoy Angelfish from the same bag of mixed Pinoys that the cichlid guy got in. Unfortunately, this one killed its female after the first laying, which was pretty disappointing. This is just a large Venustus, not all fish are beautiful, but it's a male Venustus that's up for sale and up here just to be kept safe and in good condition, as is this lovely redfin Cadango male that's surplus to need. Next along, I've got to see what it is because I don't remember what's up in this tank. Is there anybody up there? Oh yes, we've got some baby Deepwater Electra in here from a recent mouthful that was stripped. And last in the top row is what's bonded up as a pair of long veil-tailed dark marble angelfish. Not the Pinoy variant, just standard angels, but still a lovely pair of fish. This tank is a breeding project, Lamprologus Simulus. They're a bit towy, and they're right at the point of probably doing some pairing. There's a lot of digging going on in this tank of late, so hopefully going to see a result here sometime pretty soon. I do like some shell dwellers. Here we have some Lamprologus speciosus. The adults are hard to spot, and there's a good little number of fry in this tank, probably mostly under the oysters and in empty shells. The tank certainly does move and crawl when the food goes in. Here we have my breeding pair or group of Julidochromis Malawi Gombi. There's 4 adults that seem to get along in the form of 2 pairs, although only 1 pair seems to breed. They have bred in as 50 since I moved them there from their original cube, so it does show that these little tanks can work quite well. In this tank I have a pair of Pitio Lamprologus hequi, and we have some fry in this tank from a recent spawn as well. Probably close to needing to move mum and dad out to get them to go again, and hopefully get me another batch coming along. I think dad tends to reside up this end. They seem to have a happy marriage where they separate until business time. I've thrown 4 of the Lalupi we saw a few minutes ago in here, and I found these little tanks work quite well for generating pairs of pair bonding cichlids, where I'll put all the habitat down one end and presumably the good pair will take that on. And it looks like we've got that here. We've got a couple that seem to hang in this end, and then they kick the lucky losers out to the other end where I need to rescue them. I'm trying to do the same thing here with a few Telmatochromis Vitatus fry. I've got, I think, 3 in here. Some days when I feed there's 2 together, some days when I feed they're all together, so I'm not sure whether I've got a result in this one. This is the row of the divided 50 litre tanks, so each section about 17 odd litres, and they're all individually filtered, even though the water is kind of common to all. And these are display males that are up for sale. That's a red Empress there. We had a peacock in the first. In under the pot will be a Lamprologus olivaceus. It's very hard to get that fish to come out other than for dinner time. One of the fire reds or dragon blood peacocks, surplus male. We have a surplus red shoulder here, the Chilo Elo or the hambench peacock. I didn't quite get him in the film, but there's a Malawi bicolour in this section. They all decide to live in different corners of the tank. Oh, there he goes. Come on down, there we go, Malawi bicolour. Next one along I think is another of the dragon bloody sort of things. That is a little Nagara flametail. At least he kind of sat down where we could get a look. Next tank along we have, that's a male species 35 tomato. He likes to flex through the glass at the male Batoni, which will be cowering under that filter. You won't get a look at that, unfortunately, but they're perfectly safe in there. They're not hurting each other, they're just staring each other down. And I don't even remember what's in this tank, but it's hard to see. Here we have what was a pretty nasty little Mangano, and these are the Pseudoprotheus cyaneus, which I think I mentioned earlier, the Wild Ride Rodeo tank. They are just hell on wheels, those fish. And onto the bottom row, that was a male Stuart Granty Cobway peacock, got a tank to himself. This is a couple of small mouthfuls of Mangano and maybe a mouthful of Red Empress, just where I've thrown a few little fry to the total of about 40 or 50 in a 50-litre tank. They do grow on pretty well in these little tanks. As you can see here, this was another couple of mouthfuls of the Rudy Island Nyuri from the cichlid guy. There's got to be 50 or 60 little fish in there, kicking on nicely. Here we have some peacocks. I believe this is the Stuart Grant Eye Cobway again. I think we stripped 3 little females just prior to the filming of this, so they're very new little fry, and they'll be very hard to spot when they're new. They are very hard to see for the first few days. Here we have some spawn from the Malawi Island, the Sunshine Peacock, 2 or 3 mouthfuls of in here as well. And last but certainly not least is unfortunately didn't pan out from the breeding project point of view. We've got a male Pitio Lamprologus elongatus up there to the right, a beautiful fish, fairly obnoxious Tanganyikan, and we need to find him a wife.
Okay folks, so there we go, that's the wrap on the 2021 fish room tour of Fat Glens Fish in Lena Valley, Hobart. That was a lot to get through. I do appreciate you if you're still up and awake, having watched that hour and excess of content. Looking forward to pumping some more stuff out in 2022. I hope I can make stuff that you find interesting and that you continue to support me. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Tell a friend. Let people know I'm about. I hope to get to the 500 subscriber mark sometime in the near future, so that we can get the community page up and I can engage hopefully further and keep you advised of what I'm doing and what I'm about. So thanks again. Hope you enjoyed. See you in the next one.